Welcome to Project 13.5. I am so excited to be welcoming our parents of Dubai English Speaking College to our very first parent information session. It's called Career Tips, and it is aimed at supporting parents of our Year 13 graduating class. So without further ado, let's jump into our agenda for today. So we're going to be talking about a couple of things, from timing to family support strategies, networks, and platforms. By the end of this session, I would hope that you'll be able to be walking away with a clear understanding of how you can transition into that next stage of parenting with your young adult who may or may not be living abroad, but definitely wanting to have a little more independence and still having parental support. So first, let's talk about some of the truths. The truth is that as they transition into this next phase of their life, as parents, we still see our children really young and vulnerable, and we're concerned about their ability to transition, either living abroad on their own, or even if they were living in the same country as us, being able to transition into that next phase. Up until this point, we have really been supporting our students and your children with every possible option that they need to be making. We've always guided them, whether we're guiding them at home as parents or we're guiding them at school with their teachers and their support staff. The truth, though, is that now, as a parent, you have to now accept going into the audience of their life. And that means that you must allow your young graduate to take the front seat and really take the lead into these next choices. Now, on the one hand, we as parents will be thinking, but they're still so young to be making these big choices and they're still going to be studying. But on the other hand, the next 3 to 4 years of their lives, if they are studying as students, is really going to be about them learning how to take on opportunities, say yes to opportunities, learn to balance out when to say yes and when to say no. And if they're not going to be going to university, they're going to be diving straight into the world of work. And that means that they need to be capable and ready to take on choices without having to constantly look back and hope that someone's going to make that choice for them. So in the long run, by allowing your child to take the lead and allowing yourself to go from front and center stage of supporting them to really now going into the audience and allowing them to lead themselves and reach out to you, of course, when they need some guidance or support. The painful truth is you have to remember, even when it gets challenging, you are not the driver. It really is their future. It has to be their choice. As a parent, we worry, what if they make the wrong choice? What if they make the wrong decision? What if they forget to do something? What if they don't turn up when they're supposed to? And that's the thing. We have to allow them to lead, and we have to allow them to make their mistakes, because it's in that time of making errors that they're going to be growing and evolving. So remember, your biggest challenge in this next phase of their life is to accept that you are not the driver. You cannot make those choices for them. You cannot constantly keep telling them where to go, what to do, not to forget. We have to allow them to really take the lead and learn about the consequences of some of those mistakes that they're going to be making. And that's how we prepare them for the world of work. So let's start with where they are now. Timing. I like to call this timing because when we meet our young graduates where they are now, we are able to really begin to identify and to help them to identify where they are right now. Now, on the one hand, they are really excited because they've just graduated from secondary school and they are the biggest fish in the pond. But before you know it and before they know it, they're suddenly going to be the smallest fish in the pond of a larger sea, obviously. So we want to help them start where they are right now. And a couple of things that will help them is to really allow them to begin to understand who they are, what's important to them, what their beliefs are. Do they have a vision for their aspired careers? what is the purpose and what is the mission. And I'm going to talk to you in a little more detail about each of these things individually. But in a lump sum, what you want to remember is starting where they are right now means helping them to become consciously aware of who they are, what they want, and the types of steps that will be required of them as they move forward. Now, we're not saying that they have to know exactly what they want to be doing at such a young age, but what we do want them to understand is what are their core values? What are the important things in their lives right now? And I'm not talking about material things. We're talking about things that we can't really put our fingers on, but it's more of a feeling. Our values are those driving factors that help us make those decisions. So, as a parent to a young adult who's just about to launch into their future, what you want to remember is that you have spent time raising them and helping them to understand family beliefs, social beliefs, cultural beliefs, but those values are things that they've really created based on what they've been surrounded by, who they've been surrounded by, what they've learned along their journey. And these values are going to be that guiding light for them when we can't be there as parents. So, in helping them to identify what's important to them, you want to be asking them, well, what is it in a situation that makes you feel really excited? What is it that really makes you want to do something? And if they're struggling to identify what those are, it's always easier to flip it. So when we elicit core values with individuals, what we tend to do as a go-to is we will ask them to reflect on either a professional relationship or a personal relationship. And especially with young adults, it's sometimes easier because they haven't really had much exposure to the world of work. So, in helping them to tap into a semi-professional personal relationship, maybe a relationship they had with a past teacher, and asking them, I want you to think about a relationship you had with a past teacher and one that was really a challenging one for you. And then help them to identify the key elements of what was challenging. And when you help them to do that, what they'll start to identify are the things that don't work well for them when they're in relationship. And then you ask them to flip it. Well, if this wasn't what you wanted it to be, and it could be what you wanted, what would it be? So, for example, if I were to be eliciting the core values of my own core values, I would say that one of the challenges that I have is when we put a glass ceiling on something, and when I'm in a professional relationship where there is a glass ceiling. And the opposite of that is freedom to explore and evolve. So for me, a value would be that freedom to explore or freedom to evolve. So a value isn't necessarily one term, it can be a short phrase. And then what you want them to do moving forward from that is help them to identify how they will know when they've achieved that value. So, for example, using my value of the freedom to explore or the freedom to evolve, I would know that I'm achieving that value when I'm able to be really creative and I'm in an environment where it is conducive to that creativity. So you can see that I'm able to really become self-aware of what is important to me. And by knowing that, I can help my young adult to really start to identify the types of professional environments that they want to be in, the types of professional relationships they want to collaborate with, and even in helping them make those personal decisions and making new friends when they go off to university, or making friends when they're on a gap year, or making friends when they start their career. Because we have to remember that not all of our children are going to be going off to university. Some might be taking a different pathway. So by helping them understand what those values are, you're almost empowering them with that inner truth that you would hope that they would have gained by this stage. And if they haven't, this is where we can be supporting them as parents in helping them to understand what their core values are and helping them to begin to understand how to use the knowledge of those values in making those future decisions. A belief system is really a mix of things that they've been exposed to. So a belief we tend to hear beliefs when we're hearing individuals say, I have to, or I can't. We know that's a belief because it almost feels like something that they would like to do, but can't really do because there's something stopping them from doing it. The beliefs may or may not let's say the beliefs for a young person may or may not persuade them to do something or not to stop doing something, but it's almost like that pause that, when you're at a traffic light and there's the green light and then there's the amber light and the red light. So the belief will be that amber light. It'll get them to stop and kind of really quickly and maybe unconsciously think about something. But if the value is really strong, they will go and achieve that value, even though the belief might be that kind of red flag or warning sign. So we want to be able to help them identify what their beliefs are and see and help them to understand if those beliefs are becoming obstacles to helping them overcome something that they really want to be achieving. Now, let's talk a little bit about vision. We are really reflecting on a young adult around the ages of 18 and 19 years old. When we ask them what their vision is, of course, they're not really going to have that vision for life, that vision that they want to be achieving, but it's a great time to get them to start dreaming it up. During their time in secondary school, we've spent a lot of time teaching them skills and knowledge. And what we want to start doing is helping them to understand how they're going to be using those skills and knowledge, because really the future is their future. So we want to make sure that they're not feeling limited and stuck by what they believe they can do. We want them to create an exciting vision for their future and then teach them how to take those actions or take those steps to achieving that vision. So a vision for a young person might be, I really want to be financially independent in my career, and I want to know that money won't be an obstacle. So that is a vision. It might not be their vision for life, but it is a vision to get started on. Now, that purpose is slightly different. The purpose is what we want them to become more consciously aware of. What is different in this generation than perhaps in past generations is young people are very consciously aware of the kind of impact that they want to be making in the world. For parents, this might be a little bit of a challenge, because as parents, we are more aware of the obligations of things we have to do: education, raising our children, making sure that everything is okay. But when you're 18 and 19 years old, you don't have those responsibilities. And especially in this generation where they want to be able to use their voice. So by helping them identify what the purpose is for what they want to be bringing to the world is a really great place to be tapping into what those values are, what the beliefs are, what their vision is, and how they want to be creating that impact. And then the mission is kind of like that plan, what they intend on doing. So in helping them to start where they are now, this gives you the next few months to really talk to them, have these conversations with them, and remember, we are not in that driver's seat anymore. We have to allow them to explore. Now, some of our young adults might be very receptive to this and get really excited about discovering what their values are, discovering what their purpose and vision is. Some young people are really scared about the future. They're very afraid of making the wrong choice. And so they might be procrastinating. And that's okay. And that's why it's important to start where they are now. So if you're the parent of a child or a young adult watching this who has really been seeing their young adult feeling like they're procrastinating or not really wanting to have this conversation, I wouldn't push it. I would just be there on the sideline, ready for them when they are ready. Maybe leaving some hints along the way, putting things on, recommendations of things that they could be watching, but I wouldn't make it an issue. If your young adult is very receptive to this, I would have incredible conversations with them, but you have to start where your young adult is, and you don't really want to be pushing it. Just remember that it's a journey, and it will all come together. Family support. Our aim as parents at this stage of our children's lives, when we're thinking about the future of their future, the world of work, our family support is really about listening for curiosity. Listen to what they're telling you and listen to the gaps in between the words. So by listening to the gaps, we're hearing how they're feeling, we're paying attention to some of the signals they're giving us. We're not telling them what to do anymore. we're offering them a suggestion. And this is where parents find it the most challenging because they're so used to telling their children what to do, because that's what we've done as they were younger, growing older, making sure they meet those deadlines, making sure they get to school on time, making sure they do their homework, study for a test. But now we're in that transition where we won't be able to be next to them every time they have to make a decision or they have to attend the class or study for a test. So we have to allow them to have that space. And by offering them a suggestion, it is just that. And I would say things like this, you know, listen, John or Mary or Fatima, I have a suggestion if you're willing to hear me out. Some of our children will be very receptive and some will be like, Mom, no, Dad, no, I don't want to hear it. I've got this under control. We have to meet them where they are. We have to really take a breath and just hope that when they are ready for your suggestion, that they will come and ask for it. And then is what you can do to help them is tap into your social and professional networks. And what I mean by that is sometimes our children won't really want our suggestions, but they might be receptive to the suggestions of role models in our networks. So if we know that our child is struggling with time management skills, who in our network would be an excellent role model for time management skills? And what I wouldn't do is make that, you know, plan that meeting for my child and that person. I wouldn't do that because your child may not be receptive. What I would do is offer the suggestion. Hey, you know, I had a meeting last week and I met this lawyer who has been doing workshops on time management. Would you like me to share their contact details with you? Or, you know, I have a meeting with someone tomorrow and it's actually a Zoom meeting and we're going to be discussing time management for our members of the organization. It's free for other people to join. Would you like the join in link? So by offering them access to our social and professional networks, we are guiding them, but we're guiding them from the passenger seat and not forcing them to take on opportunities. Ideas and workshops are great ways to be supporting our young adults as well. Ideas are a little bit different to suggestions. Ideas are just that. Hey, I have this idea. What if 1, 2, 3? Hey, you know, I had this really great idea. Why don't you give this 1, 2, 3 a try? A suggestion is a mentoring suggestion. You know, in my experience, can I offer you a suggestion? An idea is something I've seen or something I've heard or something that I know might be happening that would help them to make that next decision. And always listening. But we're not listening to tell them what to do. We're listening to be curious. We're also listening to understand the signals of when our young adult really will need us, but might not know how to ask for that support. So some strategies that I can offer you with helping your young adult prepare for their future career and also help you to transition with them into this next stage is to set a plan. And I don't mean a plan for them, I mean a plan for you as a parent. We have to be able to prepare ourselves for how we're going to tackle those difficult conversations with our children who are no longer children, they're young adults. And when you're setting that plan, what you're adding to the plan is, how do I want to react when? Or who do I need to support me with when? Or when times get difficult and my child won't listen to me, how do I want to be responding? How will I remember not to be in the driver's seat, making decisions for them? And then prepare to change the plan and create a new plan. We're always doing that as parents. Remember, our role when we are parents of young adults is to be flexible and to adapt to change, because there's going to be a lot of change. We have to constantly be preparing those new plans. And the plan is never set in stone. It's always, always flexible. A lot of reflection of ourselves and our parenting has to go into this plan. So when you're creating the, how am I going to support my child in finding that first internship at university? Or if they're not going to university, how am I going to support my child through their gap year? How am I going to make sure that if they are starting their first job in the world of work, how am I going to make sure that they are not losing out on precious time and that they're really taking advantage of opportunities? And then reflecting on our parenting styles. How receptive was my child to the support I offered them? How well did I listen? How do I know that I was listening well? When they were not receptive to me, did I take it personal? And who can I be tapping into to support me? Who is going to mentor me through this next change? And this was one of my biggest learnings when I was parenting my young adult as she went through her university journey. My biggest learning was to know when I had to listen and when I was able to offer suggestions. And I'll tell you, although it might sound a little bit complicated and we're not quite sure, well, how, you might be thinking, well, Maria, how am I going to know when to do that? Trust me, your young adult is going to tell you. They are great at giving us this information. So you just have to follow their signals and always remember to meet them where they are. Now, using networks, what you want to remember is social media is there to really support you. And they might look like social networks, but they're actually social networks with a professional advantage. And we're going to talk a little bit about the individual networks that I would encourage you to pay more attention to and also to support your child for. But what you always want to remember that the networks are platforms that will always enrich their opportunity. Globalization means that the world is smaller, opportunities are everywhere, and we have to prepare our children for globalized careers. And that means that they will need to learn how to be visible and to be able to access opportunities from wherever they are to wherever those opportunities will be. And using those social networks will help and guide them. So let's look more deeply at the individual networks. The top 4 that came out for me that I would like for you to be walking away with today is LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Desk Careers. Now, the question is, what is the purpose of each of these platforms? And as parents, how can we use these platforms? The first thing you want to remember is to always think about the audience of each platform. And each of these platforms has a different purpose and has a different audience. Now, please remember that these are my tips. This isn't something that is based in fact of either of these, of any of these social platforms. It's just how I've been using them and how I've seen professionals in the world of work using them as well. And I want to be bringing these insights to our parents here at Desk. So let's start with LinkedIn. The gain that you can get from LinkedIn is access to professionals, mentors, and job opportunities. Young professionals are able to use LinkedIn, not just to find a job, but also as a learning platform and for connecting with professionals from around the world. It is very common today that recruiters will be using their recruiter feature on a LinkedIn platform to find their next candidate. Very often we see job openings on LinkedIn and we see people from across the globe applying to the same jobs using LinkedIn. Recruiters will also use LinkedIn as a check-in. So for those organizations that are still accepting resumes, what recruiters will do is access your LinkedIn profile to kind of check up and see, who are you? What have you been doing? What kind of experience do you have? And really that recommendation part of LinkedIn is great because they can then see what kinds of testimonials people have put on that platform to really recommend either the service, the product, or your professional practice or your professional behaviorism on the job. Then we look at Facebook. Facebook is more of a social platform, but it's where professionals will go to gain access to groups and pages offering professional skills, workshops, or even the journeys of mentors. Very often we see people accessing Facebook, not just to be connecting with friends and family from around the world, but also you'll start to see more and more that people are actually, individuals are even putting where they work and what they do in those careers, and they update their Facebook. So if you kind of want to see the behind the scenes of either a service or a product, Facebook is the place to be going, and you can have access to more of your members or more of your followers. So if you're young, if your child is trying to join an organization, what they'll want to be doing is going to LinkedIn, finding the page on LinkedIn, following the page. From LinkedIn, you can even access the people that work in that organization. You can see where they are around the world. It even gives you analytics to how many people are employed at the organization, and it gives you more insights into the kinds of posts or into the kinds of traffic that they are trying to avail from using their service on LinkedIn. On Facebook, it's more of a personal group. We have more connection to our followers and our members on Facebook, and we're able to access some of those things that you wouldn't really see on LinkedIn. It's more of a personal touch. And then Twitter is used to follow threads and industry leaders who share those insights into the professional world. Now, because of the word count limitation on Twitter, there are more phrases, there are more statements, and we're also able to be following individuals and having even more direct access to the individual, unless their Twitter account is being managed by an external provider or maybe a personal assistant. Most often, as a young professional, we will be able to tag the individual or the professional or the mentor and create conversation with them through Twitter. So we can see that these platforms that, as parents, when our children were younger, we were reluctant for them to be using, well, obviously not LinkedIn, but now that they're older, we want them to start using these platforms, but with more of a conscious and aware focus. And then there's those other platforms like TikTok is really gaining more momentum. We're seeing more organizations using TikTok, but again, the focus is different. TikTok is being seen to have organizations using their services or their products in more of a light-hearted way, giving that kind of information, but in more of a fun, short, twisty way. So that's another platform that definitely will be gaining more momentum. And then there's some obvious other ones that we're not going to get into today. I just thought these would be the ones, if you're going to walk away with using social platforms to help your child, I thought these would be great. And then, of course, we have the incredible desk careers. Our service is also here to support alumni. Please encourage your children to tap into the service at various points in the upcoming years, to ask for career guidance, to ask for some support, to reach out and see if they can gain some more discovery, and obviously reach out to find out some tips and help them to connect with the right network connection. The world is our oyster. We are here to support our alumni wherever they are in the world. And it's the usual, signing up for a session, but really tapping in and staying connected to Dubai English Speaking College, because we want to be celebrating the milestones that our graduates are going to be celebrating along the upcoming years. Moving forward, is now the time where I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I will be open for you to be asking me any